out! Get out!
July 4th, 1943, the Kursk Salient, Soviet Union. The sun rose heavy over the Russian steppe, stretching golden across a silent battlefield. But beneath that quiet plain, nearly 2 million men prepared for war. On one side, Hitler's Wehrmacht, launching Operation Citadel, the largest tank assault in history. On the other, Soviet forces entrenched like never before with 5,000 miles of trenches and a will of iron. German Panzer officer Hauptmann Rolf Steiner stared across the flat fields with steely resolve.
This is it. Kursk. The knife into Russia's heart.
But the Soviets knew. General Zhukov, brilliant and unyielding, had drawn them in. His lines weren't collapsing. They were baiting. Soldiers tightened helmet straps. Tank engines roared to life. The air stank of oil, sweat, and nerves. Soviet gunner Yuri Mikhailov, barely 20, kissed a photo tucked in his tunic.
I'm not dying here.
Suddenly, the earth shook. German artillery opened the gates of hell. Fire lit the horizon as the first wave moved forward. The largest land battle in human history had begun, and it would drown in steel. Near the village of Prokhorovka, 1,500 tanks collided in a brutal melee. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps pushed forward, elite, lethal, and arrogant. But Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army, led by General Petrov, struck back with sheer ferocity. Dust darkened the battlefield. T-34s lunged at Tigers and Panthers, closing to point-blank range. Cannons roared, earth trembled, steel screamed. Shells tore through armor, crews trapped in burning tombs. It was chaos, fury, and sacrifice. SS Tank Commander Kurt Meyer barked.
Break their flank! Don't stop!
But they weren't facing cowards. Soviet tanker Ivan Petrov yelled to his loader, sweat streaking down his face.
Load heat!
Smoke, fire, collisions. Kursk wasn't war. It was slaughter. Tanks rammed each other, crews bailed, burning, screaming. Air support failed to distinguish friend from foe. And through it all, men fought not for orders, but for breath, for survival, for vengeance. In 6 hours, hundreds of tanks were destroyed. Neither side gained clear ground, but the Germans lost what mattered most: momentum. This was not blitzkrieg. This was attrition. Kursk had become a meat grinder, and the steel tide had turned. In the northern sector around the rail hub of Ponyri, the battle devolved into urban horror. Buildings shattered by artillery, streets soaked in blood. They called it Little Stalingrad, and for good reason. Soviet rifleman Alexei Korolev, pinned behind rubble, clutched a Mosin Nagant.
But if they take Ponyri, they take the railway. If they take the railway, we're cut off.
His voice trembled, but his hands didn't. It was a place where time itself seemed suspended. Soldiers battled tooth and nail, not for grand cities or sweeping victories, but for shattered craters of earth, scraps of survival and endless fire. Each house was a fortress, every wall a death trap. Hours bled into days. Every meter gained was paid in blood. And still, Ponyri stood defiant in ruin. By nightfall, corpses carpeted the ground, outnumbering the men still breathing. The moon was smothered by smoke, the air by gunpowder. In the silence, only rats moved, feeding where soldiers had fallen. But the Soviet line did not break. Exhausted, bloodied, yet unyielding, they held. And with every passing hour, another nail was hammered into the coffin of Hitler's grand Eastern dream. Hitler's prized weapons, the Tiger and Panther tanks, rolled into Kursk with terrifying promise. He believed they would crush the Soviets in days. But Soviet mines shredded tracks, ambushes struck from shadows, and cunning turned fields into traps. The Germans advanced, yes, but every step forward left a trail of steel and blood behind. Fields were death traps, laced with anti-tank mines. Entire tank columns vanished in eruptions of steel and flame. Engineers wept, trying to clear paths under constant fire. SS Commander Sepp Dietrich slammed his fist on the turret.
These bastards knew we were coming.
Soviet artillery, hidden deep, unleashed precision barrages. Katyusha rockets screamed like banshees. Firestorms lit the sky. German driver Otto Frank tried to reverse as his Panthers track blew off.
We're stuck! Get out! Get out!
Too late, a direct hit, silence. E-34 swarmed like wolves. They weren't stronger, just faster and many. And the mud, the cursed Russian mud. Summer rains turned fields into sludge. Even tigers got stuck. The German blitz stalled. Momentum died in the mud, fire, and screams. Behind radio silence, German generals saw the truth. Kursk wasn't a breakthrough. It was a trap. And they'd walked right in. At dawn, near the southern sector, 19-year-old Soviet anti-tank gunner Leonid Malyshev braced behind his 76mm cannon. The sky thundered with tank engines. From the ridge, 50 German Panthers rolled forward, their engines growling, black crosses gleaming in the sun. The steel tide, advancing with grim purpose, ready to crush all in its path. He held fire. The first shot hit the lead tank's tracks. Sparks flew. A shell returned, shredding the trench beside him. His best friend Sergei lay still. Leonid screamed in rage, loaded again, fired. Another tank exploded. All across the line, Red Army infantry fought with bayonets, Molotovs, even bare hands. A machine gun jammed, used grenades. No grenades, used bricks. This was no longer strategy, it was survival. German officers radioed frantically.
We're losing men. We need Luftwaffe.
But air support never came. Storms raged across the skies, grounding the Luftwaffe. Communications faltered, radios spitting static. On the ground, the Soviets clung to Kursk like a clenched fist. That day, the German advance stalled. That day, Kursk became unwinnable. Hitler's last gamble broken in the fields. By mid-July, the German army was spent. Thousands of tanks lay wrecked. Fuel was gone, morale shattered. And then, like a hammer on an anvil, the Soviet counterattack struck. Relentless, unstoppable, and merciless. Operation Kutuzov crashed into the German flanks with brutal force. Hundreds of fresh Soviet tanks rolled forward. Aircraft swarmed the skies, and partisans struck from the forests. The exhausted Wehrmacht buckled, caught between steel, fire, and vengeance. Marshal Rokossovsky gave the order.
Crush them. Push them west.
German soldiers, once proud conquerors, were now retreating, hounded by armor and flame. Fields once soaked in Soviet blood now drank German. In just 1 week, the Red Army surged forward, reclaiming more ground than the Germans had seized in 2 months of bloodshed. What had been a German offensive was now a Soviet storm. Tank Commander Yuri Sokolov, his turret smoking, drove past German wreckage.
This is for Stalingrad, for Leningrad, for Mother.
The myth of Nazi invincibility was shattered at Kursk. It was the last German offensive on the Eastern Front, a gamble lost in fire and steel. From that moment, the Wehrmacht retreated. From that moment, the Soviets marched west, toward Berlin. And it all began in a field of 6,000 tanks. Hitler's dream of conquering the East lay buried beneath burned tanks and broken men. The Soviets had not only endured, they had turned the tide of the war. Kursk was proof that steel and will could break the myth of invincibility. From its fields of 6,000 tanks, the road to Berlin opened. Every mile west was bought with the memory of Kursk, and history would remember. Here, in fire and blood, the Wehrmacht's fate was sealed, and the Soviet march became unstoppable.